The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Enghouse Webinar coming to you from the Asia Pacific team. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your time. In this webinar, we'll take you through the primary considerations of email in the contact center. Why email? What are the ways of delivering email? What are the benefits of integrating your email with your other contact center channels? What is the future of email? We'll hear from our own solutions expert, Pete Verdarp, and our guest speaker for today, Bruce Horsfield from Greater Wellington Regional Council. My name is Barbara Stewart. I'm on the marketing team here at Enghouse, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. Our webinar will be recorded, and a link to this will be sent out following the event. We will have time at the end for questions, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you think of anything to ask Pete or Bruce, please drop it in the GoToWebinar question pane on the right. So let me introduce our speakers for today. Firstly, we're very privileged to have Bruce Horsfield, Head of Customer and Business Support at Greater Wellington Regional Council in New Zealand, join us today. Bruce has managed customer services teams for over 23 years in a number of roles and businesses and has been at Greater Wellington for 8 years. He's passionate about delivering a great service to the residents of Greater Wellington and to supporting and developing his wonderful team at Council. Thank you, Bruce, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today, and I know our audience on this webinar will benefit from your experience and insights. Pete Verdarp likewise has a long pedigree in the customer services industry. He has worked for Enghouse in a number of related roles before we were fortunate enough to capture him for our team here in APAC. He's worked in telecommunications and contact centre for over 20 years, and as many of our own customers have found to their benefit, he just loves to help users improve their service delivery in every way he can. Today, he's going to give us the benefit of his experience in doing just that. So just a bit of background on Greater Wellington Regional Council. The Council oversees a significant area, both in size and importance, and that is reflected in the breadth and volume of the inquiries that reach their contact centre, as you can see here in the bullet points. And as Bruce says, that's only to name just a few. Thanks again, Bruce, for taking the time to be with us today. And to introduce Enghouse for those who don't know us, or provide a recap if you do, Enghouse is a global contact centre solutions provider with developers and support based right here in ANZ. We're particularly proud that our customer experience suite is the CX industry's most comprehensive offering around today globally, which means, of course, that our customers have a great choice of CX tools to help them deliver the best possible experience to their customers. It also means we can deliver contact center solutions in the cloud, on-premises, or as hybrid deployments, a mix of both, finding organizations the best fit for their needs and helping them to build a resilient, forward-facing contact center, critical for today's businesses. And just before we move into the webinar proper, I did want to take this opportunity to mention our latest report, the 2023 to 24 Australian and New Zealand Contact Centre Decision Makers Guide from Contact Babel, since it's brand new and it was just released yesterday. It is the ANZ Contact Centre go-to guide, and it once again Enghouse is sponsoring this to the community, and we'll be sending an email out in the next few days with your own invitation to download this complimentary report, and please feel free to share it with your colleagues. Filled with analysis, insights, and interesting graphs, we hope you'll find this a useful resource for planning, strategy, and day-to-day decision making. I took a sneak peek at the report to look at the latest research on channel usage in the region, and what we learn is that very few contact centres in New Zealand and Australia are handling fax or letters, which is not a great surprise. Social media, SMS, and web chat are also low compared to email and voice. We do know from our own experience that many organisations are using SMS more as an outbound channel than is handled by the digital team rather than coming through the contact centre. And web chat is seen as a more popular method of engagement on the customer side, while some organisations have actually skipped web chat to go straight to chat box. This is a very interesting topic that we'll be exploring in our second roadmap series webinar in October. Even more than SMS, social media is very often handled outside the contact centre, and when we get to it, when we talk about email, the same considerations do apply for social media as for email in integrating that with your contact centre. So we can see voice is still king. However, we're seeing that email usage has climbed to 50% of voice usage in New Zealand, and New Zealand contact centres are continuing the trend we saw in previous years, with email more prevalent in New Zealand than in Australian contact centres. So now we'll move on to our interview questions for our panellists today. The first question we have is for you, Pete. Based on your experience with many contact centres over the years, why email? This graphic from Contact Babel illustrates the motivations that lead customers and consumers to their choice of channel in each time they decide to reach out to the contact centre. The report does cover the different motivations in more detail with what we're seeing in each country and across different age groups. It was interesting that with New Zealand customers, email was the most popular channel with younger customers. So Pete, basically, when do we find people wanting to use email to contact an organisation's customer services team?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. And it's an interesting question. I think Contact Babel have got pretty much most of the reasons there. I don't think they give much definition between them. What does urgency really mean to our customers? And really what I've seen over the years, working with lots of different businesses, and then there's certain trends that are between them, is that the urgency really is around something where it's not urgent enough for me to make that voice phone call. I'm quite happy for it to get processed in a slower time frame. I don't need that sort of immediate response to it. So that tends to be where that urgency is that it's not a pressing issue. It's something I can take my time to. I'm happy for it to be dealt with in the processing times that we'd expect from emails, which from most customers would tend to be perhaps sort of in a matter of hours, or in some cases a matter of days is really the expectation from the market. Whereas if there was something I wanted done now, or immediate action or response on, most people do tend to phone. However, there is some things around the complexity as well that would affect that. If it was a more complicated issue, for example, people still choose to phone. Whereas if it's something very simple that needs to be actioned, they feel that's very easy to do by email. But often if they try to do complex things by emails, because the customer doesn't know what they need to give you as far as information, there might be a lot of back and forth between there. Sometimes complex things via email can get a little bit frustrating. And people will switch to other channels and do that media shift to perhaps sort of, phone into the contact center as well. There is some interesting in different areas of industry that I've worked in around the emotionality and the demographic, and the device is sometimes about customer choice. From an emotion person, I might just not interact well with other human beings. It could be something about my financial situation, maybe sort of revenue collections is the reason for contact. I may be embarrassed to make that human contact, prefer it to be that sort of more distant and disjointed from the human, if you like, because emails are a little bit more informal, if you like, and not so personal. From a demographic sort of perspective, age can be a consideration as well. So when we're looking at that, different age groups, certainly younger generation do a lot more texting than they do talking. A lot of us probably have seen teenagers in the same room texting each other, for example, and for them, conversation over a voice mechanism isn't as sort of easier as sort of text conversations. Sometimes the age group changes there. And devices is really about people's choice. Not everybody switches to the phone. Some people, even if they didn't have a mobile, their choice of app on that phone is actually to use the email or perhaps a website rather than sort of, trying to find their own information that's there. Some of the other things around sort of time of day and accessibility might be from more time of day is, for me, for example, I'm still based in the UK and trying to transition down to New Zealand as part of, the move during COVID. Wasn't working out with visas and things. And I'm having to work sort of more evening times for me. Getting hold of daytime businesses is difficult. I tend to be sleeping in their sort of opening time. So sending emails is something I can do when they're not online if they don't provide a 24-hour service. Also, the accessibility can be a case of if you're getting frustrating where people are trying to get through on the phones to report something simple, perhaps there's longer wait times. Sometimes they'll end that and abandon the voice call and switch to another channel, which will be email to say, this isn't really worth me waiting those longer period of times. It is relatively simple. But obviously, that changes from business to business and it can be quite specific and lots of different use cases come out of that. And that's very sort of broad spectrum to it. And I think Bruce's opinion from more of a customer that uses it on a day-to-day will be able to come out with lots more different use cases of why they use it and where it best fits for them in their specific vertical.
Thanks, Pete. That's indeed where we're going next. So, Bruce, what would you add to that from the point of view of Greater Wellington? Why do people choose email to contact you?
Yeah, with Greater Wellington, obviously, everything that Pete just said is so true. A lot of it is to do with, we are dealing with a broad range of people and demographics. And a lot has to do with what people are comfortable with dealing, what they're using. And a big part of it is the urgency or non-urgency of the situation they're in. So, for us, we've got responsibility for regional parks. People love getting out in the outdoors. So they might be planning a trip, a week ahead of time. So they'll generally go onto our website, have a look around there, and then we will direct them to send us an email request. And because they've got the time to do that, they don't need a response straight away. They'll send us an email and we'll respond as part of their planning process. However, if you leave it to the last minute and you're about ready to head off in a couple of hours, you need to know if you need to take your dog out to the regional park, then chances are they'll likely to give us a call. So it is very much dependent on whether you're a planner or non-planner. I found it quite interesting that, especially in New Zealand, a lot of younger people tend to use emails more. And I think that's because with the devices that we've got, people going onto websites, having a look around. But once again, they're being directed. The organisations are directing them to the different channels. And clearly people are, we want them to come through the email channel because then that way it doesn't clog up the phone lines. We receive a lot of phone calls in regards to public transport, and that's about here and now. I'm at the station waiting for my train, it's late, where is it? So straight away, people are going to ring us. So it's really around that about here and now and the urgency or non-urgency of their inquiry. The other thing with email is we deal a lot with environmental issues. And obviously, people may take photos on their phones now, and so they will send us a photo of an environmental incident that they've come across, which they clearly can't do over the phone. So, by voice. So it's much better for them to be able to send us a photo via email, so we can see what they're seeing. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. So some of it is the delayed need for the answer, and indeed, as Pete said too. So thank you. So I think, Pete, you are going to explain for us what the options are for delivering email to a contact centre. when an organisation decides to let your customers email you? How do emails arrive and who handles them in each case?
Yeah, so there's sort of typically sort of three different options of how we see people using emails within the contact center. And none of these options are right or wrong. They're all really to fit your need and how you want to interact with your customers. But some of them have different ways of working, some of them have advantages, and obviously it's finding the right fit for you. And sometimes thinking a little bit more outside the box, sometimes you can mix these options up a little bit. So typically, where we find most people have been for many years because, predating contact centers when they were mainly voice only. Although email's been around for many, many years, because it always sort of started this way, people haven't sort of driven that change, is that it comes in via the sort of traditionally an Outlook shared mailbox. So all of the agents would have an inbox sitting on the side that may be sort of your info address or your general inquiries email address that you had within there. And the way of working that would produce is that you work more as a group, and it is a little bit more unstructured because the emails aren't getting delegated to somebody. Nobody takes responsibility for those emails. Nothing is saying you have to take one of these. And it really works with everybody that within that team really going into that email box and I'm going to say choosing which email they want to work on. We would hope that they would take the next one in line. It isn't always the case. Someone always says, I'm not really sure about that, I'll leave that somewhere else. And I tend to compare this to the good old days of voice before sort of contact center software, where we used to work with PBX hunt groups, and the idea was to ring all phones. And sometimes you got that sort of ethic on voice, but someone said somebody else will pick it up. And you do get that type of concept within the Outlook as well. Sometimes it's a bit challenging that you'll find some of the agents are more proactive than others, and some have the attitude somebody else will get to that. So it's about, what we find that problems within this environment is the delegation of responsibility. One of the other things that you'll find within this environment when I've spoken to and deployed sort of contact center software into these environments is that when I ask questions about how many emails you get, how long does it take to respond, there isn't any reporting data to track this within Outlook. It's very good to service. You can transact email. There is 100% use case for using it to transact it. What you really can't do is qualify how many am I getting in? When do I get them in? How long does it take me to respond? All of those things, if you think about it, that we've been running voice contact centers for many years, those reports are key to how we drive that business and how we improve that business. However, it is lacking within Exchange to give you those type of MI data. So you're really looking at tribal knowledge really within this environment of taking feedback from agents of, we think we take around this much. We think our response times are this. And traditionally, when I've moved customers more to email queuing, where they're getting that reporting data, sometimes it shines on light that the answers that they thought that they knew about their email queuing are completely different. But a lot of customers are using this within the contact center. Nothing wrong with it, but there is that ownership problem that's there, and there's a reportability problem that's there. But this is where many, many customers are at. And as I say, we're not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just a case of there are some gaps within that one. So if we can move through to option 2 now for me, Bob. So another way that emails may come into businesses is that CRMs are starting to do more and more things. They're not really just there for the agent to create a case or create an incident into there. Many CRMs can bring emails into themselves now. They could automatically create an interaction that's within there. And CRMs are getting a little bit better, but traditionally a lot of them will be very similar to the Outlook concept. It will bring the email in, it will drop it into almost like a group bucket for people to look at there, and it's up to the team to keep dipping in and out to pick up new items and allocate them to themselves. CRMs are getting a few more workflows to them where they would allocate an email to an agent so it can pass that responsibility to dictate this is something for you to do. But what I've found personally in a weakness in that is certainly within the contact center, if I offer something to an agent, that's great, but what if that agent's out sick today? What happens if that agent doesn't reply because they're too busy doing something else? We would use traditionally some form of auto logout options on phone calls, and we do on emails as well, to say that's not being handled for whatever reason. Let's pull it back and reallocate it to somebody else to say we need to get this handled. So it does have some weaknesses around there, but there's some very good use cases where some of the CRMs, depending on business, if you think about IT systems, for example, the emails coming into an IT ticketing system can automatically create a ticket, put it into a pot that's there. We've done a number of projects as well to expand this a little bit further, where you can create a harmony between these systems and the contact center as well. So one of the ways that I've done that previously with especially people like IT companies is to bring it into the CRM, because that's the best place to perhaps do an auto reply, to create that automatic ticket, which is really part of their workflow they want to do. But CRM wasn't the best place to queue it. So what we used is another feature, which is our activity queuing, which is really just queuing a packet of information to an agent, and we were queuing the web address to the job within CRM. So we're just queuing that job and delivering that job, and when it screen pops, it pulls up the CRM job that's there. So it was coming into the CRM first, and rather than it just being left into a group pot, it was notifying the contact center there was something that needed to be queued. We did the queuing so we could blend it in with other things like voice that they were doing, and making sure it was getting attended to and allocated, and then it screened pop the activity. So it was a good harmony and a good marriage between the two systems. The CRMs are certainly getting more and more prevalent around being the front end of the system for some of that automation that the CRMs can do around sort of tickets, perhaps even auto replying. Some people are putting their sort of bot type frameworks or analytics of those emails within that CRM field, but having something to queue it in the back end still can be useful because the CRMs tend to be weaker there. If we go on to option 3 there, Bob, that's okay. And this is when we start looking at emails coming into a contact center. So I'm not talking about anything Enghouse specific within here. Generally, any contact center would operate in this way, but the emails would still come into your Office 365 environment. And rather than the agents using Outlook to deal with those emails, what would happen is the contact center solution would pick those emails up from the cloud. What would then happen is the contact center would just turn that into a data packet, just something it needs to queue, and then basically would use skills-based routing in the same way as we would deliver phone calls and allocate phone calls to the right people. We'd use the same skills-based routing to deliver from the email queue to the correct agent within the system, and have those abilities to do the reporting around that. So you're getting a case of, when did I originally pick this up? When did it land into the office mailbox? When did we grab a copy of it? When did it get delivered to the agent? How long did it take for them to deal with that interaction? Was that a reply? Did they just hang up on it to say it was completed? Because not everything needs a reply within the email world that's there. But the contact center solution is able to fill some of those gaps that you're getting, where the reporting in the CRM option should be fairly good. Certainly the Outlook option has its weaknesses, and the contact center will start giving you that MI for you to understand how many contacts are coming in, what is your SLA to respond. But it also has some other advantages that we can cover on a little bit later as well. Is that okay, Bob?
Thanks, Pete. And before we move on to Bruce's take on this, we've just time to put an audience poll question up. So if you are, I think we'd all like to know what the representation is today on this. Based on Pete's explanation just now, how do you handle email in your contact center, if at all? So please make your selection, and we'll pop the results up on screen shortly. If I could ask Enghouse people and anyone whose organisation doesn't have a contact centre right now to please hold off participating for this. Thank you. So our options are using email, using CRM, an integrated blended channel solution with a contact centre solution, and are you in fact not handling email at all in your contact centre? Is it handled elsewhere in the business?
Yeah, so the last option there, Barb, would be more a case in some circumstances the emails aren't handled by the contact center. Quite a lot of people handle them within, a marketing or a media team will handle that within the business, and the contact center doesn't have responsibility. So that also is also a frequent option as well.
Right. Now, if we could have the results up. Pete, I think I'm going to have to get you to discuss the results because they're not coming up on my screen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, Bob, no problem. So we've got 46% is using an email application, something like doing it via Outlook, which is pretty much what we would expect. The higher percentage of that would be to do it in the traditional Outlook manner that's there. 8% are using CRMs independently, and those will have their own vertical reasons, I would imagine, around why they chose to put them into the CRM and use that. It probably gave them a lot more benefits, and they probably moved from Outlook to that as a solution. We then have 31% that are using a contact center for that, which sort of goes to show that there are the first highest is obviously Outlook using the traditional manner, but there are a third of the people that have joined are using it through the contact center currently. And then we've got surprisingly larger than CRMs is 15% are still being handled by different departments. They're not being keyed into the contact center, which is quite interesting because media teams and those sorts of things would be answering the same questions, if you like, because the customers will be asking via email. The same type of customers will be phoning in and asking exactly the same questions. So you'd have two different business units really servicing the same questions, one speaking about it and one typing back to it. So there might be other reasons for why they're handled in other departments, but I think the 15% would be slightly higher than what I've seen out in the field. The first option, certainly I was expecting that to be the highest anyway.
Bruce, what would you say about these results? Did you have any comment?
Yeah, I think it's really good to see that 31% have an integrated contact center channel, which is really encouraging. Like Pete, I'm a little bit surprised that a different department handles emails, because generally speaking, the same inquiries that come via voice will come via email. So, I mean, you need to have the same voice.
Consistency.
Consistency of voice. And the separate email application, that's where we came from as well. So, we were using Outlook for our one initially. So there's some challenges with that, which I can talk about later on.
Excellent, thank you. And I look forward to getting everyone's questions and finding out what they are interested in knowing as well, in case we don't cover anything on the webinar. So moving on to the next slide. It's our next interview question. So Pete, you've told us a bit about the integrated channel option, which is mainly what we're here to learn about today. Let's look at why many contact centres find that this is better, and you've been talking about this as you went. Why is it better to blend it with your other channels? Could you go into these for us?
Yeah. I sort of grouped it under sort of three key drivers. There are many, and they can change between them, but the three key ones that most people benefit. The first driver really is the visibility and accountability. So living in pre-sales these days, but my background being an ex-engineer and deployed many of these systems for at least 15 years. I've seen both sides of the story of it actually being deployed, and also sort of talking to people about the advantages of it. A lot of it is that the shift has changed from more management within the businesses of everything being visible and accountable within the business. So we're not having the reportability around those communication channels coming in and being able to sort of evidence that you're meeting SLA is sometimes a big question within business, especially when I've worked within local government, for example. That need to sort of evidence that they're doing a good job and not saying yes we are or just customer feedback, actually having the numbers to back that up as well. It also sort of helps around the visibility and accountability because, you know, with things like recessions that we've had and things like cost of living driving up or you know, especially within local government and other sort of government or organisations, then getting a bit squeezed around their budgets as well. There is that of I'm already doing enough work, evidencing I have all this traffic coming in. These are the number of people that I need to deal with it, and being able to sort of evidence that you need the bodies or even more bodies to do the job, and being able to track, you know, all lines of communication coming into the contact center is really being key to sort of go with a financial story to say the headcount I have isn't sufficient. We're already doing this. We can't take on more. Those are all sort of problems that I've seen that then that justification is needed. Also from there, it's from the visibility and accountability side, it is a little bit within, sort of certainly within Outlook anyway, it's very difficult to say, I've got a complaint, someone's complained about a response that they've got or anything along those lines. They haven't sent me the email history that's there, they've just written me a complaint. I now have to try and unpick who has dealt with that inquiry. So again, having that sort of accountability within the contact center, just like with voice phone calls, we can type in a customer's mobile number, for example, find out which agents have dealt with that inquiry. We can then sort of perhaps listen to voice recordings very easily at that point in time. We have our protection layer around there. So we can be held accountable for it, and we can also understand what our defenses are around any challenges that you have around customer service. So that's really sort of the different key things that I see around that visibility and accountability. Is just unfortunately in this world today, we all are held a little bit more accountability, and it has to be hard numbers. So that's really people moving from the older Outlook where they don't have that, are really moving in and the very basic needs to get that understanding. I often put a little bit more of a spin on that for customers around the visibility and accountability of challenging. It's a little bit more than that. How do you improve that service if you don't have the statistics to understand what's actually happening? If you don't really have the detail, then you can't make changes. And some of that accountability and visibility around those numbers will drive change as well. How do you make the decisions on how you need to change the business if you don't understand how much you're getting through the door, what is coming through the door, and having things around that? But we'll see as there's a few suggestions later on, like wrap-up codes as we go through the seminar, some key features that you could introduce that are very simple, but help you gather that information. The other thing that I see as key is, and changes when we sort of deploy into the contact center, is the utilization of staff. And that's really about when I tend to walk into environments where they have a voice contact center in place, but they're using Outlook, and I say, okay, who deals with the emails in that time? They'll say, oh, I take a member of staff out for a few hours a day, normally in the mornings, to actually deal with emails. And I say, okay, can they take phone calls at the same time? Well, no, we don't get them to log in. We just get them to process emails. And it's quite a hassle for contact center managers to start rotating that. It's taking up, you know, just the time the supervisor's having to micromanage who's going to do emails, who's going to do voice. And this is quite often where I've set up within the systems that I've done for customers, the ability for them to have a similar concept, because sometimes they like one person to deal with the emails. Other places like everybody to be able to deal with voice and emails. But what I've set up for them is a login class where they can log in to take emails as a priority, but still be available as an overflow for the voice calls. So that is also an option there. You don't have to go for a mechanism where everybody can do everything. You can still go to a little bit of a halfway house where you delegate people to log into a particular one, but automatically giving them the ability to say, okay, if things get busy, you're going to get issued a voice call. And most people say, well, I tell my person on email to go and do that. But what you find a lot of the time is they're not watching the APIs, the alerts and things that they may be getting within the client. They're not aware of the phone calls that's there. And sometimes the supervisor happens to tell them to log in. So in that staff utilization, it's more about not having to micromanage people. You can set the system up to take care of when should I stop somebody doing an email and give them a phone call instead? Because those phone calls are real time, you're more conscious around the wait times. The SLAs on emails are a little bit longer. So you can sort of get somebody to stop work on an email because it's not time critical normally, take that phone call and then jump back into that email as well. So it works a little bit better having it as a blended environment. And this is where it all working as one omni-channel experience means that you're able to better utilize the resources and better manage and not have to micromanage your contact center, which does link in a little bit to productivity. But there are some other key things that I do see around productivity that's there. Things like using reply templates within there will speed up responses, give consistency of information, and we'll touch on that a little bit later that's within there. But the productivity is also comes from what I'm saying in the visibility. You can get more productive if you can see where the issues and problems are to the system. Then you can actually turn around and say, okay, I can now make changes. I can change those problems. How do I get rid of some of these noise things that are coming into the business? You need to know how many coming in, how big that problem is, and then you can start making those changes to make yourself more productive, to deal with things you need to do, and perhaps move that noise off to another channel, better improve information, for example. So those are the key things that I see there.
Thank you, Pete. Now, Bruce, I know that at Greater Wellington you have fully integrated email with your contact centre. Can you give us your take on this? What were you using before? What were the challenges you had? What were your primary objectives in moving to a different method, and so on?
Yeah, so the main thing for us was that when I first arrived, we were using Outlook. We've got multiple groups of teams across the organisation, and they all had different. We had publicised email addresses for different campaigns, or based on a team responsibility, and so all those different email addresses were on our marketing material. Even across our website, and what was happening was they were going into respective teams. Some of those teams were permanent, and others were for short-term projects. And what it meant was that, especially in terms of resourcing, if someone was away for the day, or somebody had left the organisation and people didn't realise that their email address existed, then everything just fell into a big black hole. So, there was a lack of visibility. Pete mentioned earlier about the fact that, there was no consistency of service. There was no, even for the contact centre team, sometimes we didn't even know that a particular letter or communication had gone out to customers, until we got a phone call saying, hey, I haven't had a response to my email, and that's because it had fallen into a big black hole in another team somewhere. So a big part of what we tried to do was rein it all in. A big part of it was to talk to your marketing and comms team and say, right, for everything that gets sent out, we want you to use this one email address, and that email address then gets routed into the contact centre. It was also evident that it was taking a lot of our field staff, like our park rangers and our environmental scientists, away from what their core role was, which was to actually be out in the field doing what they do. And they were getting bogged down with dealing with simple inquiries that the contact centre could have handled. So, if you have an inquiry about, can I take my dog into a particular regional park? Well, the contact centre have got the information and they'll likely get that phone call anyway. So it means that they can then respond, whether it's voice or email, to the same inquiry and remove that from our field staff. So that was a big one of the challenges that we wanted to resolve. we also, we also spend a lot of time talking to the respective teams to say, well, you give us the information and we can take it off your hands. We can deal with it. So I think that was the big thing for us, was better visibility of what was coming in, and we were able to utilise the might of the contact centre to deal with some of these inquiries, so that the field teams can get out and do their day jobs, basically, because a lot of them saw it as admin. Having to respond to an email inquiry was seen as admin, and so that was always something that was always going to be the last thing they got to. And so, that's where, we wanted to make sure that we had a consistency of service and a consistency of response. It also meant that we could track, because obviously any organisation, you can get a number of complaints, or for us, we get a lot of official information requests from citizens, and it's really, really important that you track those requests coming through, because there's so many days that you've got to respond to those requests. And equally, you want to make sure that your complaint process is done in a timely manner and is robust. So it meant that we could have full visibility of all the inquiries that were coming through, and then we could see if we were answering them in the contact centre or if we were transferring them off to someone else. And if we transfer them off to someone else, then we in turn could then follow them up to make sure that they responded in a timely manner as well. Whereas through Outlook, we just had no visibility at all. So, and also, we, through the contact.
Oh, I think we've lost Bruce. Bruce, we can't hear you at the moment. I'm not sure if you can hear us. I know that he had a problem with his sound just before. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, and we'll come back to Bruce hopefully when he comes back to us. So now we've talked about email objectively for the business.
Emails. Yeah, very much so. Yep.
Excellent. We lost you for a second there, Bruce. So are you good now?
Oh, sorry. Yep, I'm good.
Excellent. So anything more to say on that one before we move you on to the impact on staff in the contact centre of emails? How have you find managing emails across your team?
Yeah, managing across our team, it just means that we've got peak times in our contact centre, especially dealing with public transport. So we know that we'll get an influx of phone calls at certain times. So it means that we can manage our team across the two channels. Obviously, emails, you don't have to respond to them straight away. You can have a bit of a delay on it. So we can shift our resources based on where the priorities are. And equally, we can set up so that they're skilled across different modes. So if we want staff just to do voice, they can do choice. If we want them just to do emails, they can do emails, or a bit of both. So there is a different skill in dealing with emails. So, that written ability is pretty key and can be quite different from voice. So it has made a difference to our recruitment, because we're having to look at people that can play across both channels. And just because you're good on the phone doesn't mean that you've got a good written acumen. So when we're recruiting, we're very much testing their written ability. People will say on their CVs, yeah, got good written communication skills, but you actually need to test it.
Right. Okay, so thank you, Bruce. So moving on to the next part, which will be Pete talking to us about implementing email as a channel. What do you need to know? What are the considerations for this channel? So, Pete, I'll take you on to the next slide, which I think you'll be talking about.
Yeah, sure. So this is sort of the slide we saw before, and this is more from sort of the technical ability. Most people are using sort of Office 365, as in sort of the emails from the cloud, or it could be an on-premise Exchange server. Either of those are viable, but more people are cloud-based these days, so I'll use that as an example. The contact center will traditionally just use the Azure Graph APIs to go and pick emails up from the cloud. So effectively, your contact center is just going to almost sign in as a user and check the mailboxes for new mails. If they are, it pulls it down to the contact center, and it can leave a copy in the Outlook mailbox. So if there was ever an emergency and perhaps contact center was down or anything like that had happened majorly, you can still access those emails through the original shared mailbox. So dropping back to that Outlook mailbox would be your DR in those scenarios. The other questions that I tend to get quite a lot around technicalities is I've got things like auto replies happening in Exchange. Can I still use those? Yes, you can do. The contact center is capable of sending out auto replies. You know, we're closed, your inquiry will be dealt with, or thank you for your inquiry. But you can do that on either side. If you're happy to do that and want to do it in Outlook for corporate reasons, you can do through your Exchange, sorry. Or if you want to do it in your contact center, you can do it there as well. The difference around that is if you do it in the contact center, with the ease of administration within the contact center, just like changing your sort of out of hours messaging or your holiday messaging on voice, you really want to be able to change with the contact center side. So most of the time we recommend it's done in the contact center, but there's no reason why it can't be done in the Office 365 environment as well. The other question that I tend to get is that they do a lot of email archiving in cloud, so they might back things up for 7 years and those sorts of things. Can they still do that? Because it's still using that mailbox, the answer is yes. All of those things will still work for you. So the contact center isn't really interfering with the process of email. It's just really going to be picked up, sorted in a slightly different way and given to them, but it doesn't affect those key things around sort of auto replies you may be doing or archiving that you might be conscious of. And you're not losing that there. The contact center doesn't become your mail server. We're still using that sort of Microsoft Office 365 or any other email platform that you're using. The other sort of key note around this sort of integration realistically is it's fairly simple to set up. What we tend to do is to set up just a test mailbox. So create a test at companyx.com mailbox within the cloud there and set up an email queue for that. That means that you can still use your existing way of doing emails. You can then have a mailbox that the contact center functions with. You can send a few test emails into that. Your agents can get used to how it looks and how it feels within the contact center. And then, you know, as a cutover, what we would then do is to tell the contact center to go and look and pick up those live mailboxes that's there. So it can be done in that sort of, you know, show and tell test type status, get everybody comfortable, and then migrate. It doesn't have to be any big bang approach. And that's the way that we'd always recommend, get people to do a little bit of role play through it, get comfortable, and then we would start to you know, do that full migration to cut over, just like we would set up a test number for voice, get you to use a test number to start with, and then cut over the live telephone numbers on an agreed day. So it works very similar, it's not too different, and it's not a lot of work for the IT teams to work with us to set that integration up either. We can move through to the next one, Bart. That's sort of the techie bit out of the way. But it's more for sort of the supervisors that are there. What should they be looking at? Well, obviously the emails are going to be coming in and we know you're going to get reports, but some of the key things to think about is to improve and get more consistent responses, which is some things that Bruce had mentioned. How would we do that? So we tend to sort of introduce reply templates where you can, rather than agents having to free type everything, you can create templates within there with canned responses. So if somebody asks a question about a park, can I take my dog there? There can be a reply for all of those parts of saying, you know, dog access, for example, and that reply can just be selected. The agent barely has to type anything to that. It can also insert the customer's name, also insert the agent's name. So rather than me having to free type that, which may have taken 2 or 3 minutes, I can just go and select the right template, which can take me a matter of seconds. That's there. And although that is a productivity one, it's also about the quality of information. If agent A answers that inquiry currently by free text, they might give that response in one way. Agent B may give different information. If everybody's sending the same information out, you're getting that consistency of information out to your customer base. So everybody's sending out the same answers to the same questions. And if you find that it's all being done by freehand, you'll find that there's a lot of variation. So one of those things to think about are what are your common FAQs, and get templates arranged, and be prepared to, once the system goes live, you're going to get some more inquiries that you didn't really consider that you needed templates for, and just keep that sort of library of data up to date and put new things into it. So have a little bit of aftercare time to revisit, is there anything else we should have added that we didn't think about during that initial sort of planning and deployment phase. Another one that I find is sorry, Bob, if we can just jump back on that one. Is challenging your SLAs. And this is about, people might say that they have a 10-day response time. And when we've deployed it, they actually find they can respond to all of their emails within a matter of hours, or certainly, within a couple of days. So think about changing your promise. The other one is about sort of challenging your understanding, using things like wrap-up codes to understand what type of emails are coming in. Is there any noise that you can cut out, as we were talking about earlier? Using things like quality management to see whether or not your responses, if they're being free typed, do they meet a standard? Being able to track and trace is all important. So those are the considerations around there that we want to try and keep to. We can move to the next one, Bob. Some of the key challenges that you always find with email, and this is regardless of the mechanism that you use, one of the key problems you're going to see is first-time resolution. And what do I mean by that? If a customer sends an email in, when the agent looks at it, sometimes the email needs to go back to that customer for more information before they can actually deal with that inquiry. Because the customers are free typing whatever they want, it's not a back and forth conversation like voice. You're having to disjoint it by sending emails backwards and forwards, which takes a bit more time. But the unstructuredness of those emails really means that you might be doing more handling than what you need to. And there's very few things that you can do to do that. One of the best ways that we've found in the digital transformations we've done with a lot of customers is to, we're just talking about guiding people around a website, is to actually use web forms. So having a simple form on the website, so if I was to do that inquiry to a park, it may ask me questions. Which park am I talking about? Filling in what type of dog I might have. Will the dog be on a giving that structured information so that your agent, that form can still produce an email into the contact center, but that form will have all of the information that you know that you need to deal with that inquiry. So by using that combination of not just directing them on the website to send you an email, but using the form on the website to fill in the information that you require to complete that first time, will speed up your response time and also give you a little bit more of that productivity gain in there. The other one that people say are challenges as well are spam emails. Unfortunately, introducing a contact center isn't going to solve that problem. Spam is really dealt with at that sort of Office 365 cloud area within there. There's very much little that, if that's already been passed within that environment, that we're going to be able to tell the difference between a spam email and a real email. So therefore, at that point, spam, unfortunately, is something that you have to deal with. And anyone using email will see them. We all have them within our own email boxes, and it's the same within the contact center. The good thing about contact centers, you can generally mark them as spam emails within the client, and therefore it removes those from your reporting information that's there. So it's not going to affect your statistics going on. But it is on the understanding that spam is something you do have to deal with. It does burn a little bit of time there, but there's very, very much restrictions, because the way that spam's been sent out these days, it's all randomized. It's very different to say it's coming from this source, therefore block it. It's all going to be random that it's coming in from. Therefore, at that point, it's very hard to get rid of that. So just accept it. It is something that's going to be there. and it is going to take a little bit of time just to get rid of the junk that you see coming into your queue sometimes. Is that okay, Bob?
Thank you very much, Pete. So, Bruce, I'm sure we've only got 5 minutes left, but certainly our folk would like to know more about Greater Wellington's transition to email, how you've evolved the way you've handled emails over time.
Yeah, just quickly, I think the main thing I just want to cover off is you really do need to develop a style guide for your emails and take your agents through it. We talk a lot about templates and the productivity around templates, but I think it's really important that you want your agents to add their own personality, and much like when they're talking to customers through the voice channel, you've got the opportunity to make sure that although you might use a template, they can change the body of the template to reflect their own personality or to make it unique to the customer. So, for instance, if someone says, I'm taking my dog Boxer out to the park, then you might just want to insert something in there around, oh, hey, hope Boxer has a good day. So you still want to add your little sense of flavour and personality to each of those responses. And I think that's one of the key things that we've worked on. We got the consistency, but now we're trying to add the personality so that it's not just one answer that's all the same every time.
Excellent.
That's it from me, Barbs.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, so the very last thing, got 3 minutes, Pete. We talked about changing up your email. So how do you make bring email into the next phase of the wonderful things that digital transformation has brought us to?
Yeah, so it's really sort of looking at combination, and we're talking about really now joining technologies together, or what I've seen as different technologies that are there. So using things like knowledge bases in conjunction with email inquiries. So sometimes those templates, you may have vast amounts. I'm sure Bruce, dealing with a whole local government and many different departments, those templates, you'll have many of them. And sometimes it gets to the point where you need a knowledge base in there so the agents have something to look up to and do a copy and paste it and pull information out there. So you might have sort of the templates for your FAQ type questions, but a central knowledge base for all the other vast amounts of information that they have. It's also about, there's lots of people looking at more things. We've all heard about chatbots and those, but also bots taking a look at the content of emails and possibly replying to them. Also, people looking at things like natural language processing, which sounds really complicated to read emails and analyze the information. Now, that sounds very difficult, but these things can be sometimes very simple as well. So to give you a sort of a use case around that is going into something like a local government. What if that said the word safeguarding within in that email? And that might be something urgent that we need to attend to. So by looking for key words or key phrases within there, you may change and take that out of a normal queue and put it more into an urgent or a VIP type queue that's within there. So by doing that, you're really sort of speeding up the process to get those emails that need those attention much quicker. And you're just using the search capabilities, really is what we're talking about in natural processing. Not necessary to respond. Those are things you can do with it if it's an easy, quick answer and the bot can do it and the processing can do it. But even just to reprioritize it and send it somewhere else, these things don't have to be that complex. They can be quite simple as well. But using the conjunction of different technologies to help us speed up or redistribute those emails are things that are around today, and maybe where you want to go in the future.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, so we've got very quickly some time for questions. If anybody has anything, please drop them into the question panel now. We've had one that's come through already. So, Pete, I think this is for you. With email reply template, or Bruce, you may also have something to add to this. Can it include the original customer information also, i.e. can it act as a reply rather than a fresh email?
Yeah, we within the reply templates that we tend to do, you can insert, if we would call them variables, so you can insert things like agent name, customer name within there. But one of the other sort of variables you can choose to include or not include is the body of the original email. So if you want to include the original chain, you can do. You just have to put into your template the body clause within their reply templates, and that will include the body. Otherwise, you could have it sent back as a clean email if you wish to. But if you include that body context, it will go back out just like we'd normally see our emails as a chain. So it's a choice for you. You can do either with or without.
Bruce, did you have anything to add on how your team uses replies?
No, that's exactly how we do it as well. So just as Pete said.
Excellent. Okay. So keen to hear your thoughts on authenticating and validating the sender. That's the next question. And I apologise for those who need to go, but we will certainly be sending out a recording of this post the webinar.
Yeah, sure. So authenticating the vendor is fully possible. We can do things like enhanced routing within a contact center where even on a voice call, we could prioritize somebody depending on the customer name. In the email world, we would just check the email address and we could reprioritize somebody from there. The same way that we may do by voice, we might authenticate somebody by their phone number. By when they phone in, it goes and checks and allows them through because they match an existing customer. We might ask them for information around there. We can validate an email address that's there. There is a slight difference to that if somebody phones into the business, you could validate them on multiple things. So it could validate against the phone number, but it could also ask me for my date of birth as well. So I might use a two-part authentication. With the email, unless you're going to send something back out to the customer, you only really have the sender's address to validate against. You don't really get any other email, so it's only really a one-step validation process that you could use within that scenario. The only other way is to send something out that then challenges the customer to say, please could you copy additional information before you do validation. And it's not really normal because it tends to break the flow around the emails and the customer might not expect that to come back. It'd be very unique within that environment, a very unique use case to use that. But most people will validate or reprioritize or treat people differently based on the email address that's there. But you have to think about what that email contains that we can validate, which tends to be sender name.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for now. But as always, please, to our audience, if you have further questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We've got these contact details here on the screen, and of course, we'll be sending out an email following the webinar with more details and the access to the recording and slides. So thank you very much to everybody who attended. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you, Bruce, for helping us talk about email queuing today, to our audience. And thank you, Pete, for giving us all the insights. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Phil.